Hola, hi guys, and welcome to the elevator pitch module for the Built for Business program. I am hoping at this point, right? It's Built for Biz, actually, not Built for Business, but I'm hoping that at this point that you have gone through what has been an incredible journey in terms of learning and really absorbing the information that these facilitators that have been on this program have shared. I mean, we made sure that we brought in entrepreneurs that have insight into what they were talking about. People who've actually been entrepreneurs, are entrepreneurs, and from different walks of life as well, so that you get a well-rounded quality of information. So I really hope that you've taken this process seriously and are now at a point where you have a business model canvas that is populated. You've got a business plan in place, and you are ready to go and ask for money from investors to take this business forward. Now, the first thing I probably should say at that point is, as much as people look at pitching and specifically pitching in the context of raising capital as you asking for money, I'm going to ask you to shift your mindset just a little bit. Move from thinking about asking for money rather, and move to a place where you think, I'm actually here to introduce this potential investor to what could be an incredible opportunity for them, right? You're actually introducing them to an opportunity. You're not there to ask and beg for money. So you're not coming cap in hand. So I'm incredibly excited to be your facilitator for this session because I think there's a lot of impact that it's going to make in terms of helping you draw all that information that you've been getting over the duration of your program into one cohesive pitch, an elevator pitch. Just out of curiosity, I wonder how many of us here know why it's called an elevator pitch. Let me tell you quickly. Americans love themselves, right? New York City, when it was considered the center of business, I think it still is in certain parts of the world, although we know that's moved and changed, right? Because they were the first ones to build these tall business buildings, these skyscrapers, where the boss normally has the office at the top. The idea was that if you bumped into a potential investor or somebody you want to share an idea with, for them to back it, in the time it takes for you to get into the elevator and get out of it at the top by their office, would you have pitched? Would you be able to pitch, your business or your business plan or your idea to them? And that's why it's called an elevator pitch. Just something fun I thought I should share with you if you didn't already know that. For those that don't know who I is, my name is KG. I'm Katlego Mabusela. And I did facilitate that first module, so you should know who I am, which was the business model canvas. I'm sorry if my energy then was a little low. I was just recovering from COVID, but I am, thank goodness, happy and healthy right now and able to hopefully deliver this one to you. So what can you expect from your elevator pitch module? Well, some of the things I'm looking for you to take out of this is, number one, understanding your investor's point of view in a pitch environment. So where are they? What are they looking at? What is their mindset? What are they thinking about as they sit and listen to you pitch to them? The second thing I want you to take out of this is really knowing what the exact things to include in an elevator pitch would be. So what is the information, the exact information that is required in an elevator pitch versus any other type of pitch? And in what order? Because it's very important that there is an order, and I'll tell you about what informs that order as well. Number three is I want you to learn how to effectively use the tools at your disposal, whether those tools are technology or whether those tools are your voice, your hands, whatever it is that you have at your disposal. We'll talk a little bit about how to use it in a way that ultimately makes you an effective pitcher, right? And then number four is I'll share some, key things to remember, if you would, about pitching. What should I have in mind? What should I keep in mind that'll make me an even better pitcher? From this point on, here's what I want to say to you. When you leave this elevator pitch module and you're done with it, you're going to have the opportunity to pitch to, a group of people that will include some people from, our supporter, right, which is ABSA CIB. And what I want from you, right, is to know how to blow those people away, how to get them excited about your business idea. Now, that's a skill I don't want to end here. This skill of pitching is one that will stand you in good stead. You're almost adding it to your bag of weapons as an entrepreneur to go and fight the battle that is entrepreneurship. It is also a beautiful thing. So let me not say battle, but And it's always a battle. It's not always a battle, but it is a battle. And you need to know how to fight, and you need to have the right tools in your toolkit to go and fight that fight. So don't think about it as just something for this course. It's a tool, a skill you want to have going forward. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, KG, you always, why are you in two modules, firstly, and what qualifies you to be facilitating this module? Let me tell you, because I came for you exactly, all right? What qualifies me to be a facilitator for this module? Well, 12 years of broadcasting experience, I think, right? Having worked as a broadcaster for 12 years for some of the biggest platforms in our country from a radio perspective, the likes of 947 when it was still Highfelt, I was a presenter there, moved on to YFM, youth, and there's a distinction between the two because you're speaking to different audiences, right? And then from YFM, I then went and I served for, I think, 6 or 7 years at Kaya FM. Again, a different audience, different demographic completely in that environment. But in all those moments, I had one job. Oh, so when I was at Kaya, it was to host Breakfast with Katlego, by the way. And then I got the chance to work with the likes of the legendary Bob Mabena and Skumba, which I'm sure a lot of you love as well, when I would stand in for Bob. But in all of those moments as a radio broadcaster, I had one job. I had 30 seconds between music to either move you emotionally, inform you, or to fulfill a commercial mandate. So if there's something that has been paid for that I need to say, or an advert, what they call a live read, to do that in a way that worked for the client, right? And so you can imagine over 12 years, I'm hoping that I've learned some things from there that make me an effective communicator generally. I am hoping. I should also say at this point that I didn't start out as the kind of person who might seem like a really confident person. I had to learn this over time. I was a very shy person growing up. I've got a big head and big nose, and kids can be cruel, and I wear glasses. So hey, some of the things that were said to me when I was growing up were rough. But over time, I've learned how to project beyond my insecurities, which some of us have, my fears, and etc., and be really what I'd like to believe is a relatively effective communicator. So if you're somebody sitting watching this and thinking, but I'm shy, but I'm nervous, but I'm all these things, I hope that I'm evidence that you can get over them. And through practice, you can really become somebody who's good at communicating through whatever medium you're communicating on. Just to add on to this cake of what qualifies me to speak in front of you or to facilitate the elevator module, in that time as well, not only did I work on commercial broadcasting, but I also worked in retail radio, which is a completely different space as well. When you'd walk into some of the shops, it'll be my voice that you hear as you're shopping, even garages, even banks, I think, at some point. But anyway, the point is, I've worked in that, but also for about, I think it must be about 7 to 8, this will be the 8th year now, I've had the pleasure of being a public speaker, a paid motivational speaker, and a facilitator as well. And of course, that means standing in front of audiences and moving them, and you're moving them in two places. You're moving them in the head and in the heart, right? And that takes some understanding. You need to know what the triggers to allow for that move are. If I'm here to inspire you, I'm either going to inspire you with a new idea, but I have to share that idea in a way that connects with you cognitively, right? In the head. But I also might want to move you emotionally. And how do I do that? What are the skills that one uses to move a person emotionally? So having been on stages, at this point, I think it's a couple of hundreds of stages, right? Now that it's COVID, it's screens, but what does it take to do that well? I hope that that's part of what I bring to this module, to help you as a person on the other end. Now, I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I'm hoping at this point that my confidence in Yana Rautia is not just the Popeye. He's actually going to deliver on what it is that he says he's going to share. But let's get into it. Let's talk. We said the first thing we're going to start with is talking about, really who we're doing this for. Yes, we're doing it for ourselves. But I'm saying in the pitch moment, who are you pitching to? There is an audience. Who is that audience? That is what I want you and I to chat about now. Let's identify them. Because this pitch is a fundraising pitch, it means that the person sitting across from you, whether it's across a screen or across a table or across a room, is going to be a potential investor. So what's their mind? What are they thinking about? What are they looking at? What are they considering as they look at you pitch? for me, I've broken it down into two categories, two major categories, right? And the reason I've done that is because I feel like a lot of these things can fall into those categories. I will say that whilst these are the two categories I've put them in, there might be other things that they're considering as well. So all keep that in mind. They might be distracted by their family life, by the fact that you are one of however many people that they've had to listen to pitch. They might be hungry. There might be this. There might be that. So there's a lot of information that's happening in their world that you just have to sensitize yourself to. I'm not going to say that you should know everything or be aware of everything because it's an impractical expectation of you, but I'm just saying, have the idea or the thinking that there's a lot going on in their world. But anyway, going back to these two big categories, what are they? Category number one, unos. I think unos, tres. But yes, category number one, right, is really around what I call optics. So if you know what the word is, it's about the eyes, so what the eyes are seeing. And these are the kind of things that they're considering. So the first thing is professionalism. Now, professionalism is a funny thing because you can't touch professionalism, but you experience it. So when they're looking at you, are they seeing somebody who is demonstrating professionalism? Do you speak in a way that says, I take myself, my business, my clients, my customers, my supply, everything about this seriously? Am I dressed in a way, even if it's not, and because also, I want to correct, before I even make the statement, I want to correct this. There was a time when business meant wearing a suit and a tie and a shirt. We know that we've moved past that, right? But even if you're wearing a little bit of swag or whatever, does it still communicate professionalism, right? As I'm speaking in front of you now, I'm dressed relatively casually, right? But I'd like to think that I'm packaged neatly, right? Because casual doesn't mean you're not unprofessional. It just means that you're more relaxed. So that's one of the things that they're looking at. They're looking at how you speak, like I said. They're looking at, the subtle things like your documents and how you present them. If you have a physical product, they're looking at that as well. And they're taking all these things in with the optics as well. Another thing that they're looking at that I really need you to become incredibly aware of is around body language. Body language is incredibly important. And let's talk a little bit about body language, right? In different contexts, body language can mean something very different. And here's one of the contexts that I'll give you. Culture, right? And when I say culture, I need us to be very clear that there's a difference between culture and race. Although sometimes, right, culture exists within a certain race. But for simplicity's sake, let's just be clear that I'm talking about culture, not necessarily race. Now, in that, here's one of the things that happens, eye contact, right? As a South African Black man, I have been conditioned through my culture that to look a person who's older than you or holds a higher position than you directly in the eye for an extended period of time communicates disrespect, wadella, you're challenging them, etc., etc. None of which are necessarily wrong, but in that context of that culture, I have been taught that. I suspect and I know for certain that in the European culture, right, or in the white culture, if we'd call it that, like I said, for simplicity, when you look a person in the eye, it is known to communicate not only respect, but trust that you have nothing to hide. In fact, when you start to look away, etc., you are communicating that there might be something that you are hiding. Now, that subtle understanding of body language becomes very important because depending on who you're talking to or who you're pitching to, it might play a role, yes? Right? Because if I'm staring you down the whole time, you might be receiving what I'm trying to communicate as trust, as a challenge, as disrespect, as etc., etc. Now, obviously, because we're operating within a business environment, most people who are in a business context, and the context has already been said to be a business one, will already understand that eye contact is not a demonstration of, mistrust or challenge or whatever, right? So they'd already have that understanding. But I was just showing the power of just that one little bit of body language being used without the context of your audience. So again, I'm going to invite you to immerse yourself in who your audience is, who your investor is. If you can get as much background about them, if they're an individual, get that background. If you can get, as much background as you can, if they're an organization, get that background so you know their context. because you are only effective as a communicator if the recipient of your information receives it the way you intended it to be received, right? So body language is one of the things to consider. Branding. Are you wearing your brands on you? Do you have a logo? Have you designed anything? Is it clean? The simplest of things, right? Because what that communicates to a potential investor from an optics perspective is that Motoman, they take themselves seriously, but they also understand that there's a distinction between themselves and their business. And I know that we live in a world where there are some personalities, especially in our country, that use their public profile, so their celebrity status, to drive attention towards their business brands, right? Whether it's an energy drink or it would be whatever, right? It could be lipstick, it could be whatever it might be. Those people are not necessarily wrong for doing that because they're borrowing the equity that they've built up, the value that they've built up in their personal celebrity brand, and they're trying to transfer it to their business brand. That only works, however, if their business brand shares, a market and an audience with their personality or their personality brand or the celebrity brand, and at some point, the brand itself has to stand on its own and live on its own, have its own characteristics, its own colors, its own personality. It is a business unto itself. That's why, when you register a business, it gets an ID number, basically. That number that you get, your registration number, is the ID number of the business. So it must behave as an entity on its own, a person on its own with its own personality. But I'm just saying that they're looking at things like branding. Do you have branding? If you watch these shows like Dragon's Den, for example, you'll see in Dragon's Den that there'll be moments where the idea that the entrepreneur is pitching is not great. The business is not solid. And you'll hear lines like, I'm going to back you because I like you. And the commonly used term in that is that I'm backing the jockey, not jockey Parang. No, not that one. But jockey as in horse rider, not the horse. So what they're saying in that moment is, I might not believe in your business per se as it is right now, or your business idea, but I've got an incredible amount of faith in you. Oftentimes that happens because the entrepreneur, through their confidence, communicated that they are a competent person. So they're not only competent, they're also open to hearing and learning new ideas and being taught. And so you end up as an entrepreneur, or at least as a potential investor, just saying, you know what, I like you as a person and I'm going to back you. So that's one of the things that they're looking at optically. How are you communicating that optically? Through confidence in your business and in your idea and in yourself. You are saying, I will put my last dime, my last breath on this business or on this idea, or even just on being an entrepreneur. Look, I might not know everything, but I'm ready to learn. I am hungry. I am here. I'm here for this. I showed up. I didn't come this far just to come this far. I've got grit. I've got staying power. I also understand that it's not about glam and Instagram pictures, right? It's actually about doing the work and building something. And you're hungry. If you show them that hunger, that pit, bottom of your stomach hunger as well, oh my goodness. I, for one, know that if I'm in an environment like that, I'm going to give you some time. I'm going to give you my time, which comes at a price, right? But I'm going to give you my time because you're showing me that you want it. You're hot for it. You've got the heart for it. And then, of course, from an optics perspective, they're also looking at the overall sort of business and business concept. How does it look? Is the business feasible? Is it something that I want to invest in? Which is a great place for us to actually get into the second category. Remember I said the first category is optics, what they're looking at. Now we go into the second category of where their mindset is, the POV of your investor. It's the content, the content of your pitch, which is incredibly important. And that also obviously informs their decision around whether you're investable or not, or your business idea is investable. Now, from a content perspective, what are they looking for, right? There are 4 things that I'd like to think that they're looking for. The first is an intimate understanding of the numbers. At the end of the day, for any business to be a profitable business, which is what we want you to get to, right? The numbers matter, whether you like it or not. And so you as the entrepreneur have to have an incredible understanding of your numbers. What does it cost to create your product or your service? What does it cost to run your business? What are your margins? What does the word margin even mean, right? And then you look at sort of bigger things. What is your gross profit on a monthly, on an annual basis, right? What are your expenses of the business? What is your net profit? What is, we can get into that level of detail, but the point is, I need to know that you know the numbers. You have an intimate understanding of your numbers as a business. If I ask you, what is your turnover for last year, right? The last financial year, you need to be able to tell me that without skipping a beat. I need you to know those kind of numbers. That's number one. Intimate understanding. You know what? If I could play some music, some telepagraphs right now, I'd play it because I need you to have an intimate understanding of your numbers, to fall in love with your numbers. Fall in love with your numbers. Know your numbers. Please, 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 please. Okay? Right. Number two, clarity on why you exist as a business. Now, I'm going to say that again so you hear it, and I'm going to say it slower. Clarity on why you exist as a business, right? That clarity is clarity you should have yourself to begin with. And trust me, we're going to talk about that when we talk about why. In fact, I think we've spoken about it in the business model canvas module. But we'll talk about it even more in our live sessions because I need you to have a reason as to why you exist. What is your why? Why are you here as an organization? Like, why? Why? Because what's happening? What's wrong? What's broken? Right? Because if I can see that you solve a real world issue, solve a real world problem, I can see the potential commercial value of your business idea or of your business. Right? And you need to know that. And that's incredibly important for investors. Number three, strong differentiator from your competition. Now, naturally, the world has a lot of problems, which means there are a lot of people running around trying to solve those problems. Some of them happen to be trying to solve them as businesses. And so you're at some point going to be sharing the efforts of solving that problem with somebody in your market. But what makes you different? What makes you better? Is it a particular technology? Is it a particular insight? Is it a particular level of experience? What makes you stand out from the competition? What is your competitive edge? Let's use soccer as an example. There can be millions of middle fielders in the world, or even in the PSL, right? But the ones who succeed have something about them that makes them man, hey, right? It might be their ability for shapa through passing, right? The ability to deliver a weighted ball, the ability to repetitively, right, take free kicks, tell them where they go, like precision perfect, whatever it is, but they have a thing about them that makes them different, right? That makes them different from their competitors. So they get the jersey. And so that's what I'm asking you. What do you have? Is it a technology? Is it a license? Is it a particular ingredient if it's a food? What is it that makes you different from everybody else? Your differentiator. So I'm looking at that as a potential investor. And the reason I'm looking at that, just to let you know, is that I'm thinking to myself, even if there's competition or there's a new player in the market, we're the only ones who've got ... So we're always going to retain a certain segment of the market, or we can grow a certain segment of the market because we got that thing, right? And number four, in terms of what they're looking at from a content perspective, is a clear route to market. Have you clearly thought through how you're going to take your business from 0 to 1,000? I'm being serious. Have you thought about what your route to market is? Properly thought about what the challenges that you're going to incur on the journey is. What it's going to cost to get from point 1 to 2, from point 2 to 3, right? And what are the options? There's the premium option or the platinum option, the Rolls-Royce option, right? Of funding from 1 to 2. But also there's the shoestring budget. There's the 8, or the tires are a little shaky, right? But I'll still get to point 2. What is that option? Have you considered all those things? What skills am I going to need personally as an entrepreneur to lead the organization? What skills am I going to have to bring in to augment my team and my capacity as an entrepreneur to deliver on this vision that I have? What technology am I going to need, etc.? Have you clearly outlined that? Or are you just like, Rabaken, it doesn't work like that. You must be a strategist. And there's a book I invite you to read. It's The E-Myth by Michael E. Gerber, and I'll try and give you an electronic copy if I can, right? Or at least I'll give you the link to be able to get access to it, which is an incredible book. But in that book, he speaks about the fact that as an entrepreneur, you exist in 3. You are both, or you are a technician. So if you are building let's say a camera company, you know how to run cameras or to build cameras if you're in the camera building. So you exist as a technician, so you can do the actual work when you're in startup phase. But then you also become a manager, because ultimately part of your role, which I'll talk about as an entrepreneur, is to build systems. So you become a manager of the systems. One of those systems is human beings, or it is a human resource system, right? And it's a process. So you manage the human beings there too. But you also have to manage the technical systems, the financial systems, the whatever, right? You have to be a manager. And that's a discipline mindset and that you have to have going into that. And then ultimately, you also have to be an entrepreneur. But what is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is a strategic thinker. It is the person who steps away from the business and says, for this thing to be great, it needs to operate this way. It must have these parts. That's what an entrepreneur is. They're also, obviously, they have to be what do they call it? A salesperson, have the capacity to sell and impassion others about your idea and so forth and so on. But ultimately, what an entrepreneur in that context is the person who steps back and puts the pieces of the business together, a strategic thinker. So in your entrepreneurial mind, not managerial, have you looked at what it's going to take for you to get from 0 to 1,000? That's what the people you're going to be speaking to are looking at. That's what they're looking at. Those are the two categories that they're looking at. It's the optics, how you present yourself and your business, and et cetera, and then also the information that you're sharing, the content. Those two categories exist. Now, let's move on to your pitch structure itself. What goes into the pitch structure? Before I even start on that, I want to make it abundantly clear, incredibly so, right, that your pitch structure is structured the way it is for a reason, right? And the reason is the mind has triggers. And so if you give the mind certain amounts of information or particular types of information, it asks a question. And so the way this pitch has been designed, or pitch structure has been designed, is such that when that question gets asked, there is the next bit of information that comes answers exactly that question, right? Second thing I want to say is, let's also remember that an elevator pitch is not the moment in which the deal gets done. And some people get confused, right? An elevator pitch's purpose, and maybe we should have discussed this at the beginning, but its true purpose is to entice. The potential investor, so that maybe you can meet for a date. Do you get what I'm saying, right? And so what you're doing there is you're giving just the right amount of information for them to be intrigued, number one, right? But then to also be informed. And you're hoping that the follow-up sit down will be one where you can share even more information. So I'm not wanting you to give me your whole business plan in an elevator pitch. I'm not wanting you to give me, your business profile, which I really hate when people read the business profiles in an elevator pitch. But there is particular types and particular amount of information that I need you to give. And that's what I'm about to share. Lastly, before we actually go into that structure, let me say that in your pitch, you're going to be afforded 5 minutes. 5 minutes of you pitching with no interruption and going through your elevator pitch. And then there'll be 5 minutes of a Q&A where we'll ask questions pertaining to your pitch to assess if we think you got the things, right? So have that in mind. You're working within a set time. Remember what I said about how an elevator pitch became an elevator pitch? There was a finite amount of time given to the person to pitch. And so that you're going to have that time pressure. Let's talk about the structure. What about the structure? Here's about the structure. For an elevator pitch to be effective, it must demonstrate that your business solves a real world problem. So the first place you need to start is to articulate the problem. State the problem, not your problem, but the problem that people or organizations or whatever is experiencing. And in stating that problem, I'm going to insist and go as far as saying to you that you have to quantify it. Don't tell me, you must show proof of not only amount or size, but also, place, geographic, if that's the case. Give me as much information without going on for too long, right? About the problem, make it clear in my head. So for example, if there is a shortage of shoes and you're a shoe manufacturer and you're manufacturing them at a certain price and they're really cool or whatever the case is, maybe you're the next Batu, I don't know, right? In your elevator pitch, you must demonstrate to me that there is a market of people out there who either are barefoot or are looking for alternative options. You must tell me where they are, right? How big they possibly are as well, which we'll talk about as the second thing. But you must demonstrate the need for the shoes as solidly as possible. Which, as soon as you give me the problem, so if you state the problem, my mind will go, but whose problem is this? Which moves us to our second point, our second part of the structure, which is what? Tell us who the problem exists for. And this is really where I need you to do the quantifying and giving as much data as possible. So you've told me there's a problem, there's a shortage of shoes or whatever, right? But who has the shortage of shoes? Where are they based? How many of them are they? Is it a year-round shortage of shoes? Is it a particular type of shoe that they're missing? Is it the laces? Do they already have shoes? They're just looking for better shoes because they're tired of whatever brand they've been wearing? I don't know. But you have to give me that data so that I can marry the idea of this problem with a particular grouping of people or an organization that has the problem. The third thing I need you to do immediately after that, because now you've told me there's a problem, you've told me who the problem exists for, is I need you to then state what your solution is. So how are you solving that problem? This is when you give me the magic. Note how we didn't start with, hi, my name is Katlego from whatever, we do the following things. No, I don't care about you until you tell me what problem you're solving. And this is where you then say, here's my solution. This is the solution that we deliver as an organization, or what our product does to solve this problem, right? And immediately as you say that, my mind goes, again, I can following, how the triggers that I mentioned earlier, right? As soon as you give me that solution, my mind goes, hi, man. I'm sure there are other people who do this. Or who else does this? Who do I know who does this? And so immediately at that point, you come in and you say, hey, here's what makes me different from everybody else. Yes, we do have competitors, right? Maybe list one or two of your competitors, but then say, this is what makes our organization, our product, our services different from everybody else. Your competitive advantage, your differentiator, as we call it, right? From there, I want you to then explain your business model, because you've told me what makes you different. Now you can elaborate a little bit more about your business model and what makes you different in the market as a business, as an organization, right? Tell me about how you operate. Tell me about operationally, how does your business work? And keep that short, because we don't want to go for too long, because we're trying to get to one of the most important parts. Now that you've done all of this, I want to know the numbers now. How much do you want? Right? That's essentially what I want to get to. How much do you want? But before you tell me how much you want, I want to know if it's a business that's been running before, what are your operation data? So what have you been, how have you been doing over the last year? How has COVID affected it, et cetera, et cetera? Or if it's a brand new business, right? I want to know how, I want you to start from where you are now and project into the future. So essentially, you're supposed to give me two types of data. One is historic data and future data. But if you're a new business, I'm wanting you to give me the data of the future. So I want you to give me your projections for year one. And then I always say year three. I don't even care about year five, right? Because the world moves and changes so quickly these days that you can't truly say where you'll be in 5 years. You can't even say where you'll be in a year, but where you intend to be. Now, why am I asking you for year one and year three? Because it gives me the idea that you've got two types of brains or two types of thinking within you as the entrepreneur. The year three is the dreamer year, or the idea that you want to build and scale and grow your business, right? But year one rather, gives me the tactician in you, that you also are practical. You do think, you understand what it's going to take to get there over the next 12 months, right? But in giving me these numbers, what you're essentially allowing me to think around, right? Oh, and also let me state, at this point, before you even get into the projections, you could maybe state how much it costs to create your product and how much you're selling it for. But it's not a must, because that question can get asked in the Q&A, right? But what I was going to say is, by the end of this, what you would have done is you would have come in and given me the idea that, hey, there's a problem. You would have told me who the problem exists for. So you've raised the alarm, you said who it exists for, but you're saying, don't worry, I've got a solution, and this is the solution I'm providing, or I'm proposing to provide, and then saying, don't stress, I'm different from others because this is what makes me different, and this is how my business actually operates. And you know what? If you give me 5 clipper, 500 million, or 5 meat, whichever one it is, right? This is how I can use it to build my business. And ultimately, you're answering the question of when you would pay back. So that's your 5 minutes done. After that, I, as an investor, have the opportunity to now ask you a question. And I can now ask you a question based on the information you've given me. I can dig deeper. I can say, So that 5 million that you're asking for, what exactly are you going to use it for? Are you going to, and then you can explain and say, no, the credit are more. How do you intend to pay it back? Well, as I projected, or I shared in my projections, we anticipate we'll be able to start repayments after 16 months, and it's going to be 5 rand. I don't know. Why am I stuck on 5 today? But that's the number, right? I can say, talk to me a little bit about your manufacturing process. Or you say you've got this particular technology that makes you different, or this competitive advantage. Tell me about it. Where did you get it? How did you get it? Blah blah. So I now, as an investor, have the opportunity to dig deeper. I've been seduced. Like I said, you're trying to share. You've shared me into a conversation now, and I can go further. I can go deeper. I can go deeper with you. So that's what the structure is. It is in your notes, so you should be able to, what do they call it? You should be able to go through it. Please structure your PowerPoints as such. Which brings me to your tools. The tools that you should have to be able to be an effective pitcher. The first thing is, I want you to have a PowerPoint. I got some or computer. We're living in 2021 as a young person or as a person, an entrepreneur trying to build a business. You must make the efforts to find a way to get to a computer. If you can be on Facebook, if you can watch the shows, mention us TV shows, but if you can watch right, clearly you can get the means to put together a PowerPoint. Part of being an entrepreneur is being a hustler. We hear the DJs Booze of the world saying, number one, Knoxman is always pushing right? So you have to be able to get the means to create a PowerPoint, even if it's 15 randa for your internet cafe in Kotropong, if you have to travel to it, just do it and create a PowerPoint. It's incredibly important, because what a PowerPoint does is Hansubua, right? It allows for me to follow. It also gives you the opportunity to put pictures on, so it stimulates me as somebody who's listening to you. Now imagine in this particular session, we've got 150 of you. I'm going to be sitting through 150 pitches. If you don't do a PowerPoint, my mind might disappear whilst I'm listening to you, right? And you could miss the opportunity to impress the person you're trying to impress, who's the potential investor. So also business is done with PowerPoint, especially in a world where we can't physically go to each other. So we have to share ideas all the time. You need to get good at using PowerPoint. One of the tools you need to have. Business plan. I made the distinction earlier that a business plan is very different to a business model canvas. The business model canvas allows you to, it's almost like a dashboard. It allows you to create or to compile the information that is necessary to understand how your business is going to operate, right? But a business plan is just a more in detail document outlining how you intend to operate the business, right? How you intend to run it, what the costs that will be incurred are, and so it's just a more detailed document. But the business model canvas is a flash of what it is that you're intending to do from a business perspective. And we've spoken about it in the BMC or business model canvas module, so I'm not going to go too much into detail around it. And that's also something that you need to have, a business model canvas. And on a daily basis, you're not looking at your business plan. On a daily basis, you're looking at your business model canvas. You're assessing if the what's it called? If we just go back to it, if your customer segments are still the same, if the channels you're using to engage with them are still the right ones. At all times, you're doing that and checking on that. Those are the tools I need you to have as a business person wanting to pitch and being an effective pitcher. As I wrap or begin to wrap, not boom boom chip, but as in wrap the session, right? I want you to remember a number of things. That obviously we're existing in a dual medium world now, where we are both in the real world but also in the virtual world, and that means that you need to know how to operate in both spaces. From a virtual perspective, I just want to share some quick tips, and then we can, finish our session. And I think I'll really give value in our one-on-one, or even more value, hopefully, in our one-on-one session. Not one-on-one, face-to-face sessions that will be scheduled. But from a virtual perspective, here's point number one. Always have your camera on. People buy from people, not from names, they buy from people. They buy into people. So if I don't see you, you are taking away one bit of information, whether it's sensory or otherwise, that would allow for me to build a trust, a bond, a connection with you. Put your camera on. In putting your camera on, make sure that you never have the light behind you. Light must always be in front of you so you don't look dark so we can see you, so you're not a silhouette. Make sure that you're in control of the space around you, so nothing that you haven't planned for pops into screen, and etc. etc. Right? So be clear on that. Make sure you've got a strong connection. If you're on Wi-Fi or if you're wherever, make sure your connection is not going to keep cutting, because that's not going to help you at all. At all, at all. If it means going to a library or going to Mag and Bean, taking the last 20 rand and buying a coffee, go and do that and do it there. My point is, do what needs to be done to make sure that you've got a strong connection. Another thing that I advise is that you email, your pitch deck or your PowerPoint in advance. And the reason that is God forbid you're trying to screen share or you're trying to show, the person you're pitching to what it is that you're talking about and technology fails you. If you've sent it in advance, it gives them access to it on their own so that they can follow on their own. So it's just a fail safe to put in place. As I'm sure you've seen, please, there are moments where I've looked away, I can admit that. But for the most part, I've been speaking directly to you in camera. And that's important because how I receive it on the other end is you are looking at me. If you're looking at the screen, you feel like I'm looking at you. I'm not looking there. You know what I mean? So just remember, look into the camera, not at yourself on on the thingy, on the laptop or the phone if you're using that. So that's just a bit of information from a virtual perspective. But from a face-to-face, what should you consider? You know, dress in alignment with the brand of your business, your brand personality, even in the virtual world, because you still have to be dressed, right? Dress accordingly. If if you feel like wearing a suit will best represent your business, do that. But if you feel like jeans and a t-shirt, right, will best represent your business, do that. But still look neat. If you think wearing your branded gear, the name of your brand, yay, wear it because you're representing your business. But just know for yourself that you're dressed accordingly. Don't be there with all kinds of notes because that's distracting, right? If at all possible, maybe write a cue card or two with just key words, but you shouldn't need that because you've got a PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint is what helps you stay on track because it's got the information that you need on it, right? I always say to people who are pitching in a live environment, having stood on stage before many, many times, like I mentioned, make sure you've got comfortable shoes because, hey, yeah, you don't want to be standing in front of people with uncomfortable shoes because it does some things, and I'll talk to you about that. It's just first you start to get distracted because that's what you're thinking about, but it also forces your body to do weird things like locking your knees. As soon as you lock your knees, you lock your back, you lock your shoulders. When you lock your shoulders, you're in trouble because you're going to start to breathe shallowly, and your pitch might change, and etc. etc. So you start to tense up, which is the last thing you need. So to be loose, must be loose, right? So that you can speak and engage with your audience. And the last thing I would say is that project your voice. So from a live environment perspective, and there's a difference between shouting and projecting. Projecting is speaking from your belly, your diaphragm, and supporting, the flow of air and raising your volume a little bit, yes. But shouting is shouting, and I don't want to do that because I'm sure, the mic will pick it up too much. But the point is, project. Understand the distinction between projecting and speaking out. But also don't be sheepish because I can't hear you. Then you're irritating me, and I'm trying to hear you, and I'm getting irritated with you more than I'm hearing about your business. Right? Speak also, just as a pointer perspective. Speak at the normal pace that you speak at. Right? Always every 5 seconds or so think, not 5 seconds, maybe let's say every 30 seconds or so, ask yourself pace in your head. Okay, and then you check it. Eventually, you'll get used to speaking. What tends to happen is when people come into a public speaking environment, whether it's virtually or it is in the real world, we tend to speak faster than we naturally speak. And I think it has to do with nerves, amongst other things, and just an awareness that there is a time constraint in our speaking. Just pace yourself. Speak normally. Allow me to hear your ideas. In terms of emails and the use of that, and the reason I've also included that, I will say to you that, if you're pitching for a meeting or trying to engage somebody on email, a couple of things to remember. Number one, be concise, get to the point. Don't, I hope your day is well and the children, that's not what we're here for. Because you've got no context at that point of what that person's doing and what their time constraints are. So introduce yourself at that point, say what the email is about so that they already know why it is that, they should continue reading. and hook them with something, that says, oh, I want to read this. Whether it's your hook is a recent accomplishment that you have, or some data that you have. Did you know that 50%? Are you aware that 500, well, not 500%, 60% of businesses lose their whatever over whatever? I'd love to talk to you, and then I'm from wherever. I'd like to talk to you about whatever, right? If you're doing it on type, on email. And then attach supporting documents to support that email. And that would typically be your business plan that goes with that. Or not the business plan initially, but maybe, let's say, your pitch deck that goes with that. A couple of things to remember as we wrap up, as we continue to wrap up, because my wrap up is clearly very long. We can all smell BS. And I'm not going to obviously say what that is. I think we're old enough to all understand what I mean when I say BS. Authenticity is incredibly important. I said people buy from people. If I feel like Juta, again, remember Washel. So if you're in that, but if I feel like you're lying to me or hiding something, the likelihood of me proceeding to the next part is reduced. So remember that. Have that in mind, right? Don't lie. Be authentic. Be true. If you don't know, say I don't know, but I can go and find out, or I would like to go and find out. Just be authentic, be honest. Nobody's trying to make you look like an idiot. So don't be afraid to not know, because you can always go and find out, right? And then also, you know, trust that you know more about your idea or your business than the person sitting across the table from you or sitting across the screen from you. So trust that, have that internal trust, because you've incubated this idea, you've incubated this dream. And so when you present it and you share it with the world and you give birth to it, who will tell you about it more than you? There might be people who ask you questions about it and you explain, but you know it. Trust that internal knowledge of it. This is not a trial. This is not, we're not here to try and make you look bad when you're standing in that elevator pitch. I'm trying to assess if this is an investable opportunity. Selfishly for myself, I'm listening, I'm like, can I invest? That's where my mind is. If I'm representing an organization, is it in alignment with our investment strategy as a business? Right? So it's not about, can I embarrass this person? Can I make them look stupid? No, that's not what we're there for. And when you are sharing a story, if you do use storytelling or narrative to pitch, and we'll talk about how that could look, and I'll share some examples with you, especially when you're trying to paint a picture of the problem, right? Before you quantify it, if you use storytelling, make sure that thread is very clear. That your story, I understand why you're telling the story so that it makes absolute sense. Let me give you an example really quickly. If you are, if I were sitting looking to meet to engage with what do they call them, lawyers. So say there are two options for lawyers. The first one comes and says, "Hi, my name is Katlego, and I come from Katlego and we do the following things, and we are amazing, and we are really great." Option number one, right? Option number two comes in and says, "Hi, Katlego. Before we talk about what it is that we do, I'd like to share something with you. I grew up in the township, and my father used to run a small business, but his business was a spaza shop. And every night, the old man, or at least every morning, the old man would wake up super early. By 5 o'clock, he'd already have opened up, and he'd come back late in the evening when he closes. And funny enough, that small little shop is the same small little shop that allowed for myself and my siblings to have food in our stomach, to have a roof over our head, and it took us to school. But after a couple of years, and just because my father wasn't, educated and informed, he found himself facing, a legal battle that he unfortunately lost. But in losing it, he lost that business, the same business that had done so much for our family, that had kept us together, that had kept us going in tough times. And I saw what it did for my father, because it took away what he had put so much of his life into, and so much of his heart into, and his sense of being disappeared. The reason I wake up in the morning is to help other South Africans avoid that same fate that my father found himself in, so that they can keep their legacy and hopefully pass it on to their kids as they grow, so that they can possibly grow those legacies. In this country, there are X amount of entrepreneurs who are in need of this type of service. Now I start to quantify. I think, I would like to think that that type of introduction is more engaging. It's not a flat opening, it's more engaging and it captures you, right? Because it paints a picture than the first one. So if you're going to use storytelling, make sure that it makes sense about what you just that you're talking about, as opposed to just telling a story for the sake of telling a story. Anyway, um, the last thing I would say is this: is internalize everything that I've said to you. Take it in, practice, internalize it, and then forget it. One of the things we used to, I was taught in radio was that learn everything, learn everything about how to control your mic, the techniques, how to operate your desk. Learn everything, internalize it. And then once it's in, let it go and trust that it's inside. And then let the personality and the flair come out. Once you've internalized it, the magic happens when you let it go. So that you don't sound like a robot and you are trying too hard. Let it go and let the magic happen. But that means you need to have done the first part, which is to internalize and trust, so that you can trust that it's in there. Anyway, I hope that this session has served you well. I hope that when we go into our live interactions, you'll have many questions. I look forward to answering them and further serving you. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you in this particular moment. And let's keep building, let's keep growing. We'll chat soon.